You know, sometimes it's hard doing this whole reviewing thing. Sometimes you get the low views, sometimes you get the weird comments, and then other times, people come offering up their best suggestions, which, are problematic by themselves, but you get the sense that they come to you specifically because they know that you can defend this underrated topic in 30 minutes or less, which I do understand, but I don't necessarily approve. However, I'm very disappointed this week that nobody has told me to talk about this show sooner, because DC Superhero Girls is criminally underrated, and I think everybody needs to get a taste of what this is really like. Why have I decided in this year of our Lord, 2021, to discuss this particular topic? I don't know. But I'm sure if we actually hop into this review, we'll actually figure out why. So let's jump into it. Even if you haven't seen DC Superhero Girls, you've likely already seen the series, because it is literally all around us. That's because the franchise has been recurring since the mid-2010s. Loosely speaking, its roots tie into the now-defunct DC Nation block, where an animation faithful Lauren Faust has allowed to create a series of shorts, aptly titled Super Best Friends Forever. With a muted color palette and a limited cast, the series gained a sort of cult status after its release, and generally seen as one of the stronger premises in the incubation anthology. The franchise, separately launching in 2015, seemed to take a hard left and supply an original, more centralized vision of its own. Before this series touched down, the franchise was party to a 2015 web series, a Lego toy line featuring web shorts, and a trio of films from 2017 and 2018, a duology of films based on said web series, and a TV special based on the exact same lore. By 2017, Faust had revisited the characters to reboot the franchise at large, with a style more reminiscent of that initial short concept. And in 2019, the artist now known as DC Superhero Girls 2019 came to Cartoon Network with a fiery vengeance. The series carries over some narrative elements from the previous entries, mainly the web series. Some voice talent was shuffled around, some lore was likely expanded upon, and the general ethos is lighter and snappier. But generally, the name's still the same for a reason. The main sextet of superhero girls go to high school and live their lives around their secret identities. Citing a more physical focus in a few areas, the series is allegedly more comedic and emotional than media previous. Fittingly, the first short representing this iteration debuts ahead of the theatrical release for Teen Titans Go! The movie. The first 4 episodes, framed around Batgirl's arrival to Metropolis High, throws us into the midst of the sextet assembled. From there we meet Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman, Kara Danvers, aka Supergirl, Z Zatara, aka Zatanna, Jessica Cruz, aka Green Lantern, and Karen Beecher, aka Bumblebee. After revealing their secret identities amongst themselves, they come to know each other better by upholding sweet justice, literally, and come to form their own grouping, aptly titled the DC Superhero Girls. It'd be difficult to discuss the whole group without recognizing the people that bring them to life. Now, since the 2015 series of old, there's been a fair amount of crossover and shuffling among the casts. There's a lot of characters exclusive to one set or the other, but beyond that, the voices of the main 6 have experienced a radical enough shift. The only one maintained from web series to TV cartoon was Grey Delisle Griffin as Wonder Woman, the de facto leader of the group. The little I got to watch the web series to compare and contrast convinced me that the new slate may very well be superior, at least in my mind, but that partially hinges on character analysis. I mean, as far as TV animation canon goes, it definitely feels like you can't even have a Harley Quinn or Batgirl-related project without Tara Strong at the helm. The quirky, energetic vibe that she infuses into these two is possibly unmatched by any other. In 2015, she got to voice the former, but the latter was handled to Mae Whitman previously. As more of a subdued take on the character, it was a solid interpretation, but my preferences certainly lie more in Tara's favor. The rest of the cast is able to deliver on more youthful, emotionally charged performances. It's not 100% energy all the time, but granted, they're all able to switch off on a dime. Even the most shy or reserved characters get their own defining moments. You're likely to hear a lot of familiar faces throughout. There's not one of the main 6 that I consider unremarkable. Depending on who you are, it probably starts to grate on you. Like in most shows, half the cast isn't carried by 3 people, so if you figure out what percentage of your cast is comprised of Blue Regard Q Kazoo, brace for impact. The animation handled by Jam-Filled Entertainment up north allows the series to carry a fast and loose movement philosophy with a relatively complex style. And for a studio steering Loud House and the Casa Grandes to technical excellence, it's par for the course. But seeing this energetic fluidity giving this concept life means something else entirely. As wild as it sounds, I thought it may be a touch too over-animated, but when I made my way through more episodes, I realized that the visuals actually keep great pace for everyone. This version of Superhero Girls is known for its snappy pacing, but when a character or event dictates things slow down a bit, the animation gracefully keeps in time. There's a good mix of characters that help you appreciate the finer details of this handiwork. Like without the right close-up, you may not notice the more subtle line weight. It imitates a pencil mark being rough and uneven, and while it's not really an original touch by any stretch, it adds to the strong curves and lines all throughout these designs. The background work is simple but effective, but it blends in and sufficiently highlights its main protagonist where it can. The character design is also worth highlighting, of course, it's a very notable part of the show, but again, the intricacies are perhaps not given enough shine. Going back to the original shorts, each character had a pretty distinctive build and structure, and it all fits personality and power set here too. Despite being a highly energized episodic comedy, DC Superhero Girls has a committed sense of continuity and a strong sense of characters. Even beyond all the superpowered suspects, everyone's got a significant sense of self. I like what they did with Kara and Babs in particular throughout the season. Each of them got several great arcs to develop, not to mention the episodes they tend to headline. They're just fabulous in their own right. I can't really say any one character in the main 6 fails to stand out. I mean, some tend to get more screen time, but everybody gets a good opportunity to show off their best qualities. It's difficult to describe without relying on the stories to speak for themselves. The stories, while we're on the subject, are pretty basic. They're fairly character-driven, hinging on capturing a character's unique reactions to individualized situations, and a lot of these plots would be interchangeable as some of the shorts. What happens if we have these characters babysit the Teeny Titans? How about stopping a robbery while on shift, or perhaps mending some breakups in the heat of battle? They all lend themselves to supernaturally wild conclusions. As touched upon previously, there are several stories that give these characters significant growth once the dust settles. 9 times out of 10, they won't let one get by without some butt-kicking chaos thrown in. Sometimes the really chaotic episodes end quite abruptly, which, while not conventional, does unintentionally help us feel a bit more grounded in its flagrant whimsy. Generally, its structure knows how to satisfy. But before we start to wrap up here, I did want to touch upon one more aspect of this series, its reception. Because while this show does get deceptively little coverage as is, the few folks who do seem to have taken it to task over some pretty interesting criticisms. A lot of them do question the show's standing as a pro-feminism platform, and related themes coming to the conclusion that certain episodes or character arcs were rather bigoted or sexist in nature. When I sat through the show itself, I was open to the possibility that perhaps these would be valid complaints and that the writing obfuscated some clarity in such an area. But as I got deeper into things, the more I came to the conclusion that these arguments seemed like little more than major misinterpretations of what's going down. With the whole show hinging on how these 6 girls make it through high school fighting crime, they interact a lot with their male peers and villainous rivals. Some of their relationships are amicable, others not so much, but they respond to each other through the lens of their characters themselves, rather than as members of a certain identity or sex. Each character is flawed, but there are a few episodes that leave this up to scrutiny. One of the first few episodes, in fact, concerned Jessica Cruz deliberating over a shitty breakup Hal Jordan's going through. His ex has a comically scary obsession with him heightened by this, and he is frightened of her presence. But as Cruz would come to discover, he's not exactly blameless in this scenario.
You broke up with her over text?
I put a smiley face in it. I'm not the Joker.
The joke, if you choose to buy into it as such, being that Hal Jordan's an egotistical coward who didn't have enough gumption to end a romantic relationship on good terms. In a later episode, this is followed up with not only his ex, but his former best friend, and some random cat came back with a crushing vengeance, and now he chooses to patch things up in a cosmically misguided but somehow equalized way?
You have every right to be mad at me. This is all my fault for being so awesome.
Came back and became the crushing punchline of the whole thing. There's a lot of strong personalities in this version of Metropolis. Whether they're on the side of good and evil, they can stand out for the good or the bad. The male superheroes, which, while being paired up with the girls often enough doesn't make them true analogs of anyone, are as varied in personality as the girls are. It's likely that the more theatrical ones will steal the spotlight, but again, there are notable teams that just kind of kill this idea, right? Zatanna and Oliver Queen, they hate each other's guts, but their skills on stage dovetail off of each other pretty well. Babs and Barry Allen are pretty tight in a meeting of the minds, but it doesn't detract from each other's own skills. The former still an enthusiastic tech whiz, and the latter still an affable speedster. Meanwhile, Hal and Jessica butt heads consistently, but they bounce off each other just as easily. They may be similar, but they complement each other where they can. Half of each side doesn't even have a significant other half. The idea that the boys are just there to be bested and outdone just feels kind of half-baked, like you'd have to watch quite selectively to come to that conclusion. Moreover, it's just difficult to even decide that all these uber-chaotic storylines funnel into the end result of erroneously propping up these female characters. The quintet's obviously outlandish scheme to kill off Diana's crush is not shorthand for lazy female empowerment. Batgirl's boss being a dick to her is not build-up to a crescendo regarding girl power. Superman stealing Supergirl's credit has nothing to do with misogynistic tendencies. These are things that happen for reasons, and they happen to them because they're characters in a story, not because they're props for the moral to shine through. This show's moral compass is simple, stupid to grasp, but it doesn't hold everyone to that universally. These are teenage girls. They have flawed relationships, they have wild interactions, they can have problematic traits, and not fix them at the end of an 11-minute segment. I definitely don't see the boys getting as much development, but you know what? That's easy to explain too. They're supporting characters, playing second fiddle to 6 main characters. Generally, well, I think there are a couple stray issues that you could give the side eye and examine a bit closer. None of them make up a consistent enough pattern to make the jump to labeling this show as sexist on the whole. Everything has its place in the show. Most, if not all, of the choices made with these characters were made to accommodate the lore and the stories they wanted to tell. If one's experiences illuminate how the series can be unintentionally harmful or something like that, then that would definitely make more sense.
Just hit her!
No!
That's not something you can square away with facts and logic. That being said, it did bother me that what seemed like a cursory glance or a basic understanding of how the show worked was informing some folks' judgment of how it juggled socio-political messaging, which this show largely doesn't. And generally, there's a lot going on with this show, and even if I have my own hot take, I'm not here to dictate how to feel. What about these certain aspects? I'm not here to dictate, period. I'm a dog. But moreover, I'm a person who cares about what we can consider earnest storytelling, which is precisely what I get out of this series, a silly but solid superhero comedy that can update its material while keeping the integrity of the characters intact. So in general, it feels like a great series to me. It's memorable, likable, uncomplicated fun that I think we could stand to embrace more. Honestly, I'm not even sure why it's flown under the radar, but someone really ought to fix that. It'll scratch that itch for a good action comedy in a pinch, but more so, it's another great opportunity for an old pilot to get its time to shine. In a way. Give it some time. I promise it won't take up your whole week's worth of scheduling.